Many years ago, I was quite headstrong. Some would even say that about me today. And I think it perhaps all stems back from an experience I had in high school. The school I went to was one of the first to offer computer science as an O-level subject. Well, as you can imagine, there was quite a demand for the option, so they decided to test all the pupils for suitability. There was only a handful of computers, maybe 4 or 5. So I did extremely well at the test. In fact, I scored the highest in the school. So what happened next absolutely devastated me. I was rejected off the course due to how bad my English language was. From that time on, I was just absolutely adamant to be successful at my chosen subject, even applying for college a year early by mistake. Well, when I was old enough, I attended college, and not only did I attain high marks, but I also won an award. And from there on, I naturally progressed to doing computer science at degree level. Now, there were only 3 schools countrywide that offered that course, so I attended the closest one at Wolverhampton Polytechnic. Soon after I started the course, they picked up my maths really wasn't sufficient, so I ended up doing an evening class to get an A-level maths in just 6 Wednesday nights. I left higher education with an honours degree in computer science on a Friday and started work the following Monday. Not just at any workplace, no, but to specifically work in research and development, on the cutting edge of computer technological advancements at that time. I went from strength to strength and I was enjoying every moment. And alongside this secular career advancement, my relationship with God had been sustained and was actually even growing and was getting better. So I was on top of the world. The world was my oyster. I had the world in the palm of my hand. I felt I was succeeding at work, I was succeeding at church, and I had a young family that was developing along nicely. And I sincerely thought, yes, this is my place, this is my ministry, this is my purpose in life. I'm to earn a shed load of money at the thing I love doing to support the local church. And yes, I had a few fairly major setbacks. One of them was I contracted chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS. And it's what the doctors diagnosed yuppies with back then when they couldn't spell myalgic encephalomyelitis. And man, it took me ages to even say that word. That was the time when they didn't even acknowledge that ME existed. But no, I was doing well. I was progressing at a steady rate. I was better. And then it happened. The company decided to pull out of the UK market after I had been with them for 10 years. I was made redundant. Listen to that word again. Redundant. You know, that's a posh word that really means we don't need you anymore. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I had been a senior troubleshooter for the company. I had worked on some very important projects over the time and travelled the world doing that. My company was local. My family was local. My church was local. My friends were local. So finding another job anywhere like this one would mean a significant increase in travel, daily travel, or worse still, having to relocate my family. And God was silent. I had entered the desert, the wilderness. It's a harsh, a barren place, a place where there is little refreshing water, a place that is hostile to any type of life, be it plant or animal. A place where there are no maps, no signposts to navigate by, where the landscape shifts over time. A place where there is no human to be found, or even a place where a human wants to be found. This is a place where a lot of biblical characters end up. And looking back at their stories, we see how God has shaped them, how He's molded them in those places, how He's formed them. Many of us find us in those wilderness places when we have been zealous, when either by ourselves going for something for ourselves, or going zealously after something for God. I mean, just think about Moses, how he fled Egypt after killing one of the gods, and how he was tending to his father-in-law's sheep next to the edge of the wilderness. And God meets him in a burning bush, only for Moses to return years later to the wilderness again after leaving Egypt for a second time with the people of Israel in tow. Again to be met by God in the desert place, in the wilderness, and given the 10 commandments and instructions or guidance on how to lead that nation. Then there's the story of Elijah. Elijah lived in the northern kingdom under the wicked reign of King Ahab. What a place to live. What a time to be under. You know, this bloke, King Ahab, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those who came before him. And to top it all, Ahab married a Phoenician princess named Jezebel, and she established the cult of Baal worship. And words fail me to describe the depravity of this woman, Jezebel. Elijah, a prophet called by God, is probably the best known prophet to us all. He was anointed, he was an expert teller of the future, and a precise executor of the judgments of God. And he was the top of his field. He was the senior consulting prophet to the prophets of old. Yet, at Elijah's peak, the top of his career, say, after the famous story of how the prophets of Baal were defeated at Mount Carmel, we read this. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it so ever severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them." So Elijah was afraid and he was running for his life. Then he came to Beersheba in Judah. He left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush. He sat under it and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than any of my ancestors." Wow, this amazing man of God, this man who's just moments earlier called fire down from heaven with a simple death threat from Queen Jezebel, just sends him on the run. And he decides that God is done with him. This is the end of his ministry, just like those that have gone before him. Now is the time to end it all. Please take me, God. This is my fate. This is my end point. And so it's so easy for when life throws us a curveball to do the same things, to have the same reaction as Elijah. We bring out the comparisons and we stop to realize that God has made us individuals. And so he deals with us individually. And he deals with Elijah individually. God miraculously feeds him. But Elijah is just so desperate. And God doesn't seem to be giving him any answers at this time. Even though God has miraculously fed him and fed his family throughout his entire life, Elijah now feels shortchanged by God. So Elijah takes matters into his own hand. He goes, "Yeah, I know what to do here. I'm going to seek God out. I know where I can find him. I'm going to go and do that." So he travels 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb. And another name for that is Mount Sinai. And perhaps you would know it better as the mountain of the Lord. And those 40 days and those 40 nights remind us of the times that Moses spent on the same mountain seeking the Lord too. And in verse 9 we read this. "There he went into a cave and spent the night, and the word of the Lord came to him." After all that journeying and all that time, this is the words that's spoken. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" You ever had one of those type of God moments? Just reflect for a moment here. I've just hinted at it really. Elijah had done all God had asked. He'd travelled 40 days and 40 nights to get to a place where he knew God would be. He'd found a cave to rest in, the cleft of a rock. And hey, even to some rabbinical understanding that's out there, some rabbinical teaching that's out there, this was the same cave where Moses met God. So Elijah, in his thoughts and in who he was expecting the same treatment from God as Moses had at this moment. At the very least, this was going to be a defining point in his life, a defining moment where Elijah would feel rewarded, where he would get to meet God. But instead, he gets met with this question: why are you here? And that's the question that I felt when I was made redundant. You know, I was sure I was doing the right thing. I was sure I was doing what God wanted. Why was I now stuck out in the wilderness? And actually, I'm embarrassed to say that God has asked me that question so many times in my life. Why are you here? It's such a shocking question, and it's been shocking to me every time he's asked it. And just like me, Elijah answers the wrong question. He doesn't ask the question that is being asked. Elijah thought, well, God's got me here. He's got me to this point in my life. He knows why I am here. So God must really be asking this question instead. Why did you run into the desert? So Elijah tells God what he's done for him. If you like, he blames God. He goes, God, you've got me into this mess, but I've been zealous for you. And guess what? Now I've got a target on my back. And some have commented, well, this is where Elijah went wrong at this point, that God never told him to run. They say that it was a faith issue with Elijah, that he lost his nerve. But really, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's necessarily true. Yet, yes, he knew his life was in danger. But you see, Elijah's story is not like the other stories in the Bible. Elijah's life is absolutely jam-packed full of supernatural supply. His default position would not have been to lose his nerve. You see, he'd seen God repeatedly supply for him throughout his life. Some say that actually he was not commanded by God concerning the Mount Carmel slaughter. They go, that's where he sinned, that's where he went wrong. But this was a man who knew God's heart intimately and who had never been presumptuous about what to do. You read about other kings and rulers and prophets and different people at that time, and they presumed at different things of God. But Elijah was never presumptuous. Whatever caused Elijah to be in that place at that time, God did not appear to accept his answer of being zealous. So we continue with the story in verse 11. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." And Elijah must have thought, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now it's going to all happen. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. Now, I've always heard that passage translated like that, especially last part. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. But that last phase literally means this, a fragile silence. After the fire came a fragile silence. Now, some of you know that I often like to go for a walk up Malvern. And it's anything but silent up there. Even during lockdown, it wasn't silent. There's always the sound of the wind. You hear the rustling of the trees or of the small animals squirreling by. And mountains are like that. Generally, they are not places of silence. But sometimes, on the odd occasion, when the wind drops and the animals are still, and there is silence. And oxymoronically, that moment is emphasized by the shout of silence. And that time, the stillness, it's as thin as air itself. And it's fragile and it can be broken by the slightest thing. Even if you're standing there and you hear your heartbeat, it just breaks the silence. You see, that type of silence, it embraces you, it surrounds you, it hugs you, it holds you in. And it's at that time with those feelings that Elijah knows it's God. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled the cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. You see, Elijah knew that nobody could see God's face and live, so he covers his eyes. And then he hears God speak again. Why are you here, Elijah? Ma leka po. How frustrated must Elijah have been? After all this fireworks, after all this demonstration, after all this show, he gets the same question. Why are you here, Elijah? Ma leka po. And it's really interesting because in this context, those words could be translated like this. Those words, ma leka po, could be translated, who are you, Elijah, here in the desert? Who are you, Elijah, here in the desert? Now, wow. That question now reframes everything, doesn't it? It now changes everything. Who are you in your current set of circumstances? And God was saying, I've supplied for you for all of your life. I've led you and I've guided you. I've given you miracle after miracle. And now, when all that ceases, who are you? And in our deserts and in our wildernesses of our lives, when God's direction seems to have stopped, when God stops speaking, when our world seems to collapse, perhaps God really is speaking, but he's speaking through that fragile silence. And the words that he says are, who are you? Who am I when what I've become, I can't carry anymore? And who am I when the personality and the self-image that I've spent so much time crafting and working on may lead to the death of me? And who am I when everything, all of my non-essentials have been stripped away? Who am I? And what's happened to the great Elijah here? There's no more miracles, no more thunderbolts, no more earthquakes, no more 10 Commandments. This zealous warrior has been given the most difficult mission of all. To confront his pride, to be humble, and to see himself as he truly is. Because when all is said and done, who are you before the Lord? If you're in the desert or in the wilderness, when the Lord seems quiet, and you're in that fragile place of silence, know that God has never been so close to you, that you actually are in the most privileged position of all, because God is confronting you face to face. He's looking you eye to eye. When everything's been stripped away, those eyes of compassion, those all-seeing eyes, that all-knowing person is sitting there accepting you, staring you in the eyes, and is asking this question, who are you? So when you're there in that desert place, which so often comes to us after a time of success, know that God, who supplied for you in the time of plenty, still cares, still loves you, still knows you just as much as when you were flying up there high. He still knows you there in the desert place. And know that perhaps it's not the desert place anymore, but it's the prime place. It's a privileged place, a place where God is staring you eye to eye, where God is starting possibly the deepest, most meaningful conversation of your life.